get started. I will call the Finance Committee of September 20th to order. It is 7:15. I will take a quick roll call. Amy?
Here.
Michael Fiore?
Here.
Bill Rotundi?
Here.
Frank Parker?
Here. I go by Joe, just so everyone knows.
His alter ego.
What's that?
No, sorry. His alter ego is Frank.
Okay. Well, you guys are all friends, so you can fill the rest of us in at some other point. That's great. Okay, Kevin's here. Paula?
Here.
Zach?
Present.
Bonnie? Yelena?
I'm here.
Just a couple of housekeeping items, just so everyone knows. Aaron is no longer on the Finance Committee. He moved on. I just want to thank Aaron for all of his service and his insight and thoughtfulness when he would ask questions and working with the Finance Committee and the various members. So I appreciate all of the efforts that he did, and best of luck to him in his future endeavors. And then Pat Tarantino will no longer be taking our minutes. So again, thank you to Pat for putting our minutes together. It's a thankless job, but it's needed, and I really appreciate everything that Pat did for us. I also want to welcome Rachel Metis. I don't see Rachel logged in unless she's one of the phone numbers. She's going to be the recording administrator. Mike, will Rachel be joining us, or is she just going to watch the video?
Go watch the video.
Okay. So Rachel, welcome. And we have a new number that I just found out. So it's Joe Parker. Frank, known as Joe Parker. So he's
Right. Yep.
So welcome.
Thank you.
So Mike, with that said, I will turn it over to you to start the meeting.
All right, thanks. Just like to give you an update on the building projects. For the Norton Town Hall and the Senior Community Center, we've purchased both parcels of land. Currently, we're reviewing owner's project managers. The building committee received 13 RFQs for project owner managers, and they've narrowed it down to 3. And last week we did interviews with the 3 companies and completed that Thursday. And we're now checking references and expect to have a contract by next week for OPM.
Hey, Mike, with that said, I know there's a lot of activity going on in the parcel that we just purchased between the town hall and the police station.
Mm-hmm.
Now, are we receiving rental income on that property from, I guess it's the state, or?
No, we're not. The previous owner is.
Okay, and that was terms of the P&S?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I know Dr. Biello is on to give an update on the school projects.
Hi all, thanks Michael. Good evening to, let me put my ugly mug on here. Good evening to all, and hope you had a restful summer few months. The general update is we have 2 projects, as you know. We have the train project, which is basically an energy conservation project around solar and the boilers and water, et cetera, at the 3 elementary schools predominantly. Train has been in. We have a boiler for the Yale School of the 3 boilers anticipated in the next week and a half. And then we'll be up and running, if you will. We'll go with the 2 old ones for the remaining of the winter and then come back in the spring and continue that process. We've also piped in certain portions of it. It's actually now hanging from the ceiling. I'll send you some pictures if you'd like through the chair or all of you, whatever way you'd like it. But it's been, I told Steve, or Mr. Evans, excuse me, this morning in a side conversation, it's been a really somewhat of a slow process. A lot of it is the supply chain and getting things out. As you all know, the construction trades and all of these trades are having a difficult time with getting things out because of things like trucking as well as actual materials being available. So that's where we're at with Train. Mr. Evans will be I believe the FinCom representative to that group. I would anticipate getting a timeline from Train sometime in the next week to 10 days on what they anticipate for the remainder of this year through December. And then from January on, it's going to be pretty slow just because the schools are occupied. And we're not going to take any chances on moving heat in the middle of January and February just because of the weather. And so we anticipate the solar panel work and the continuation of boiler work to start taking place in the springtime. We are also filing all of the paperwork requirements for all of the kickbacks that are part of setting up the payment long-term, that are part of the process. The second project is the athletic complex. Ms. Daniels, I believe, is going to be the representative on that. We have scheduled the meeting, but Ms. Daniels reminded me that Mondays are not a good night because of FinCom throughout now and town meeting. So she might miss one, but I also figured out today that I have to reschedule that meeting because we need to make some shifts in the schematic design of the field due to everything from wetlands to that wonderful sewer that's underneath that area and not connected to 123. So we had some information today. We'll share that with that committee, which has 13 members on it. I believe the Train only has 6 or 7, just less involvement from folks. It's predominantly, the Train is predominantly FinCom member, school committee member, and then internal folks like myself, Wade, Matt, etc. And then, and General Neal is on that one too. And then the athletic complex has some of our supporting youth programs that would potentially be utilizing the fields. They're involved, as well as FinCom member, as well as administrators and athletic director. So that's kind of like the breakdown. And I can send you all the names and information if you'd like. The long term is that the bid would go out and close and be opened by March on the athletic complex and potentially breaking ground by May. Figuring out which project to go first will be a determination that needs to be made. Do we start at the current Adams Field and work into the multi-purpose field and then the tennis courts, or do we go tennis courts first and then the high school? So we have to figure that out. And a lot of that has to do also with money. In other words, as you all know, again, this whole industry of building has gone up. Anybody tried to buy a piece of plywood in the last 3 months, you probably know that the prices are outrageous. So we're utilizing Gale Associates who's done all of the major projects in this area throughout Massachusetts. And so we'll come out and hopefully the goal is to potentially have, if we go with the process we're thinking of using, Adams Field opening for sometime in September with games being played. So that would be fantastic because that's football season and soccer season, as well as track. So we don't want to have to go into the school year having to play all of our games away and so on and so forth, or have to find other avenues. So that's the goal. We'll have a better timeline once the bids are done. And then from there, hopefully be able to meet that and then start that fall, continuing to work on the project. We don't see the project as all at the same time project, just simply because manpower is a problem with companies right now, as well as materials and supplies, even in the athletic complex world. So we think that it'll probably be a phase-in project over that time period going into probably the spring of 23. That's the update.
Thank you, Dr. Bynum. Does anyone on the Finance Committee have any questions for either the town projects or the school projects at this time?
Mr. Chair,
Zach?
is there a Gantt charts on any of these projects where somebody could look, what's supposed to happen within, what is anticipated to happen normally as a normal construction project? Has anybody put together Gantt charts for these projects that somebody could look up on a website just to know what should happen by certain dates?
The school department's prepared to give you that, yes.
we'll have that once we have our OPM on board. What we're looking at right now is once the OPM's on board, we'll go out, work with them to develop an RFQ for architects, and we will go out to bid and expect to have an architect on board by the end of the calendar year. And generally, they say you have to plan on 12 months of design work by the architects. So right now, realistically, you'd be looking at groundbreaking in the spring of 2023 for the building projects. And I know the building committee was looking at occupancy in 2025 right now. But once we get the OPM on, we'll develop a schedule and get that over to you. Thank you. And I will say we did go out to borrow. We got a good rate. 1.47 is the true interest rate. And as part of that, we had a ratings call with Standard & Poor's, and they did reaffirm Norton at AA+, but upgraded us from adequate to strong. So we're doing well in that aspect.
Nice job, Michael. That's fantastic news. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
No problem, Dr. Baird. And Michael, congratulations on that. A lot of hard work went into keeping that and getting us upgraded. So we appreciate it from you and your team and your staff.
And just on that, one of the suggestions that Standard & Poor's has had in the past and was that we should have a financial policy manual, which I forwarded to you, I believe. I know you were having trouble with your email, I found out, but if you can send that to everyone on the committee, and any feedback you have would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, Mike, can you send that later on tonight too? I don't know what's happening, but everything's got the junk mail is getting deleted. So I did, but I haven't sent it out to anybody. It's gone.
Okay, I'll send it again.
Appreciate it.
All right. And just to give you a financial update, I can share my screen here. Let's see. Let me open it first. So our free cash has been certified. Give me a second, I'll pull that up.
Mike, when you get there, can you do me a favor and just give a high level on those different categories? So I think.
Okay, I will, and the town accountant is also on. So our free cash has been certified, and for some of the new members, free cash is what the balance is in our accounts at the end of the year. So it's made up of different things, money that's turned back by departments that they didn't use during the year, revenues that exceed anticipated revenues. And so this year, our free cash was $4,238,298. And just to give you two large items that make some of that up, we had $1 million in tax payments that should have been before June 30th, but came in after June 30th. So they were certified as free cash in last fiscal year. And the insurance holiday we had was almost $1 million. So two big items, which drove that up to the $4,238,000. And you can see the enterprise fund retained earnings, $2,179,601. And the enterprise fund SOAR, $2,515,515. And I can show you So our, let me try and blow it up a little.
We're not seeing your screen, Mike, if that's what you're trying to do.
Yep, let me try it again. First, I'll share the local receipts. All right, can you see that?
There's nothing there, Mike. There we go. Yeah, you have to blow that one up a little bit more. I can't make it out.
All right. All right. So I'll go to the end. So in our local receipts, the top category is motor vehicle excise. And so as you can see, we exceeded our anticipated receipts in motor vehicle excise. We collected 115.16%. The second item is other excise, which we also exceeded what we anticipated. The third item is penalty interest on taxes, which was 121.54%. The payments in lieu of taxes was slightly under what was anticipated. And I'm going to shrink it a little so you can see the categories. There you go. Other departmental revenue was under what was anticipated. But overall, we did well in what we had anticipated for receipts. And as you can see, let me shrink it a little. Our total for the year for the town was about 1.2 million above what was anticipated. So that became free cash. So that is one aspect of the free cash. I just want to go to the second sheet on that. So I just want to show here, if you look at motor vehicle excise, you'll see that we collected 333,000 less than the previous year. One of the reasonings for that was last year, the previous year, the last bill went out in April. This year it didn't go out. Last year it didn't go out until June. So that money did not come in the fiscal year. So that's why that was lower. And licenses and permits were lower than the previous year by 204,000, but were well within what we anticipated. So overall, if you look at the town receipts, it was about 767,000 less than the previous year. The next thing is that makes up local receipts is what we call turnbacks, or money that wasn't used by departments. And I'll go over that with you. The first function 1, is the general government. The main item in there is 89,000 was the FinCom reserve that wasn't used, and tax title 23,000 that wasn't used, and municipal building 15,000 that wasn't used. Number 2 is public safety, and the public 146,000 of that is due to SEMREC. They had grant funds, so we didn't have to make the total payment on the assessment because of the grants they received. And then police and fire total turn back of around 300,000 for the 2 departments. Number 3 is school, and there was $80,131.78 turned back. 51,000 of that was from Southeastern Regional, 26,000 from Norton Public Schools, and 2,400 from the agricultural school. Veteran services, 5, which is human services. Veteran services accounted for 73,000 of that. Some of it was the part-time position wasn't filled, but the bulk of it was benefits that they didn't have to pay out. And then under 9, employee benefits, 1 million, the bulk of that was the health insurance holiday. Any questions on those?
Mike, was that health holiday, was that a month?
It was 1 month, yep. And that was due to lack of use because of COVID. People were putting off certain things that they would have gone to the hospital for, elective surgeries and things like that. So our health group did really well.
Mr. Chairman? I didn't hear who that was.
It's Joe Parker.
Joe, go ahead, Joe.
Got a question for Mike. Those breakouts that you mentioned, that kind of made up the pieces of the different functions, are those called out on any of the attachments that we received, or is that just something that you have on your own records?
That's just something I wrote down in my own records.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chairman?
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Zach.
Mike, so is it safe to assume that you're going to be recommending putting some money into a reserve account this year?
Yes.
Okay.
So Mike, with that said, going through that, it looks like we had free cash mostly made up of our conservative financials and projections, which we need to do on revenue. So nice job there. It looks like the turnbacks, thank you to the department heads for managing their departments during these crazy times and have that ability to turn back some of those funds. Much appreciated. And it looks like, if I had to summarize it, the whole year, we didn't run into any real surprises. I think we all anticipated the El Nylon. I think you gave us that heads up at the beginning of this last fiscal year on that $1 million payment.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a good thing. I wish I know it'll never be perfect, and I know there's pros and cons, but at some point I'd love to see free cash hit, minimum, but I know there's a lot of challenges there, and I know how we use it, so I think this is a good thing. With that, you were anticipating any potential turnbacks that didn't materialize because of the whole coronavirus and the pandemic?
I was not, it was pretty much as expected. And the concern I had was, and I still have for this year, is the motor vehicle excise, just due to the shortage of vehicles and whether people are going to be going out and buying new vehicles with the costs that they are right now. So that's a concern I have on that. That's the revenue side of it. We did have, we may see some of the turnbacks again next year that we saw this year because people, like I know the MMA has canceled again all live meetings. They're not having any conferences, so there will be money available there. Whether that changes later in the year, I don't know, but right now they're not.
Is it fair to say, Mike, with the building permits for the Woodstock project down on Leonard Street, have we seen most of that income that we're going to see out of that project in these numbers?
There will be more when they do that. I don't know. They still have the retail space out front. They're building. They pulled their permits for the Home Depot, and I believe they pulled their permits already for Yale. But they still will, there will be some more. We're hoping that the next phase of development across the street, we met with the state last week, and they're getting ready to auction that property off. So we're encouraging them to keep moving forward with that, and that will give us some more industrial area. And I'm sure Condyne is interested in purchasing that.
Okay, and that's the part behind the highway barn there, the salt farm?
Correct. Yep. And then it also there's a lot of development that has been permitted and is being talked about on Mansfield Ave. We have 2 40Bs that will be constructed, one next to McDonald's and another one next to Alberto's. And there's a lot of vacant land along that strip that right now people are doing due diligence on to look at development.
Mike, with those 40Bs, are they new projects or were they ones that were on the maps or on the books and then they kind of faded away and now
they're new, and those 2 projects put us up over 11%. So we've hit our 10%. So any 40B projects, anyone looking to do something similar to that, it would have to be a friendly 40B that the town would agree to. They just can't come in and do them now without that.
Okay.
And I just want to share with you some of the free cash history. And as you know, the Division of Local Services always recommends that the free cash be a minimum of 5% of whatever your budget is. So that's the targeted goal. So, we've had significant free cash in the last few years, and hopefully with all the development, it continues that way.
Does anyone on the Finance Committee have questions for Mike pertaining to free cash and some of the items we saw on where they came from, turnbacks or above what we estimated for receipts? Okay, thank you guys. Thanks, Michael.
And as far as the state budget, there hasn't been any major changes. On this sheet, you can see where we were with House Ways and Means, then where we were with Senate Ways and Means, the Conference Committee, and then final. So this category right here is our local aid. So it varied from the governor's estimate of 16,538,975, and then when House Ways and Means met, it went down to 16,504,745, and the final outcome was closer to the governor, 16,517,646. As far as the other aspect, so when we made up the budget, we used $839,403 of free cash. The Hicks Fund, $200,000. Ambulance receipts, $700,000. The Dog Fund, $10,000. Septic betterments, $35,000. Wetlands protection, $3,000. The debt exclusion premium, $13,646. And then the indirect reimbursements for costs attributed services that the town provides to the water and sewer department, the $112,325 and the $533,254 from water. And then some of the offsets, 300 remains for in the overlay reserve. And then the pass-throughs, the state aid that comes for the library, $36,154, goes directly to the library, and the $966,791 school choice receiving tuition that goes directly to the school department. And then we have our county assessments, state assessments, transportation authorities, GATRA, and the MBTA. And then charter school tuition assessments and our school choice tuition assessments. So those are payments for students that from Norton that go to charter schools or go to another school choice district. And then fixed and shared expenses, $15,486,082. Then Southeastern Regional, $1,505,760. Bristol Agricultural, $75,570. And for those of you who don't know, the large expense with that is this. They have a building project that now we're required to make payments on. And then the budgets themselves, the general government, $13,767,362, and the schools, $31,812,760.
And Mike, with that said, one thing that we were supposed to receive was regarding the Hicks Fund. There's kind of a high-level slide presentation that was available describing how that Hicks Fund works.
Okay.
I don't believe to date we've received that.
All right. I'll talk to the treasurer.
Okay. And I think it was coming from the select board, if my notes are right.
All right.
Thank you.
Any questions on that?
I have a quick one, and I apologize because everyone on the call but me probably knows, but what is the overlay reserve?
Overlay reserve is funds that have to be held in case the assessors have a case that goes to the state that someone questions their assessed value, and the assessors has to give money back.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Does anyone else on the Finance Committee have any questions regarding this schedule and the status of the budgets today? Okay, hearing none. Thanks, Mike.
And just to give you I know Zach had asked about, so this is our stabilization fund, and right now our balance in our stabilization fund is $2,164,579. So hopefully, we'll be putting some money in there at this meeting to bring that back up.
Mike, with that, did the rating agencies look at the stabilization fund?
They do. Maybe James can talk about, they like to see that we have a percentage of our funds in a reserve. James, do you want to talk on that?
Yes, they do. They look at the stabilization fund, the capital stabilization fund, and the free cash together, and they want the three of them to be closer to 10% of the budget.
So our goal is to have 10% of that current year's budget in stabilization, or they're
Pretty
ready.
much,
Okay.
or at least the sum of the stabilization fund and free cash.
Right.
To be, I think on the policy manual we use 11% as the goal.
Perfect. Thanks, James.
And also, I just wanted to point out, we did take out $439,500 out of the stabilization fund last year at one of the town meetings to fund the budget. That's when there were a lot of uncertainties about COVID and everything else. So I'm hoping that some of that money can be put back in now that we have free cash.
Thank you.
And the other fund that James was referring to is our capital. And one of the things in the financial manual, I know we always talk about too much reliance on free cash. And one of the things in there is to look at budgeting for capital and budgeting for stabilization. That, as James said, we have a target, and our goal is to meet that target. So right now the balance in capital is $283,696.45. And as I'm thinking about capital, one of the things I'd like to do at the next meeting is to give an update on federal funds that were received, FEMA, CARES, and now the American Rescue Plan, if that's okay.
No, it makes sense. I was just gonna ask that, so that's great. So,
And then we have OPEB, and James can help me out here if I'm wrong, but I think in the plan, it's to get to a goal of $200,000 into OPEB each year.
That is correct. That's the plan until we get to the year 2035, and then the retirement fund should be fully funded by then. And once that happens, it will free up a lot of money in the budget that we could use to start more aggressively funding the OPEB. The goal is to have enough money in the OPEB fund so that we could take money out of the fund in the future to fund the retirees portion of the health insurance expense every year. Right now, we're paying it as we go. So we're funding the retiree expense out of the operating budget using available funding, which would be taxes or free cash.
And I know we hit you with a lot of numbers, but feel free to reach out to myself or James anytime. Just email us any questions you have on any of this, and we'll be happy to answer.
and Mike and James, we have a couple of new members, so would you just give a kind of a high level what OPEB is?
Okay, OPEB is other post-employment benefits. So this is to cover the cost for retiree health insurance. And James, what is our OPEB liability right now?
It's just under 100 million. It's 99.5 5 million, I think. It's a moving figure. But basically, OPEB came about a few years ago when they realized there was a significant liability for most governments and actually just any company that offers post-employment benefits to retirees. And rather than letting people pay it as you go, the way we're doing right now, they want us to recognize the liability and start funding it similar to what we do with the pension plans, where we're required to have a funded plan in place. So OPEB is doing basically exactly the same that the retirement plan does for retirees, which is to provide funding for future benefits.
And when I was talking earlier about the free cash, I mentioned that, we should look at 5% of our budget each year. And James, I believe for water and sewer, they look at 20% because they just look at if there's an issue at the water treatment plant or some issue with sewer, there could be expensive things to address. So that's why they require water and sewer. Our DLS recommends that water and sewer have a higher percentage.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Zach?
Right, just, you did put a lot of numbers out here, so, what is your, obviously, we're in a better position than we've been in a number of years by what you're showing us. So what is the, what would you like to see done with some of this money with the select board and the school department? Is it, you want to just put it in stabilization? Do we want to try to do something for the kids, the seniors, or put some more uniforms in town? What is the big picture? We're in a better place. We've had holes in the budget for years. What is your thoughts on this? Not to mention the federal money that we'll talk about next week.
Right. Well, I would like to continue what we've been doing, increasing our the amount of money that we put in OPEB each year. I'd like to, replenish the stabilization fund, obviously, and we need to put some substantial money in our capital. But I'd also like to hold on to a lot of the free cash, just leave it as free cash for the unknown, to see if we might need some of that in May, depending on what happens this year with COVID in the town and in the schools. I'm just want to make sure that we have some money there in case there is something that we have to address.
Thanks. So you don't want to play it conservatively. That's fine.
You also,
Sorry, Jim. One question I have, just skipping back a little bit. SEMREC, I just want to make sure that, so right now we're reaping the benefit, if you will, of various grants in there. What's the potential that potentially those grants may dry up or not be offered later on in the future?
I will check in. I don't know if any of the chiefs want to talk on that. The 911 grant should be pretty stable, I would think. Obviously, we never know what could change, but right now it would seem like the 911 grant would be stable. And we kind of have a good commitment from the state that the expenses that we spent on the building project itself, that they're going to continue over the next few years. We're paying our note with that. So hopefully it continues that way. We're projecting the next 5 years it will, and we'll have a good deal of that paid off.
All right. I just don't want to lose line of sight that we're reaping the benefits of that budget now with potential grants. So, all right, James.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind everyone that we've been using free cash every year to fund the budgets. If you look at the spreadsheet that Mike showed you earlier, we used 839,000 of last year's free cash to fund fiscal year 22. And I'm sure that the newly certified free cash will be used in October to supplement some of the budgets. Plus, we typically set aside anywhere between 600 and 800,000 for the following year's budget. So before we start thinking about reducing free cash in the future, we need to get away from using free cash to fund operating expenses. Until we do that, it's very hard to try to budget a smaller amount, because then we're going to be short for the following year.
Thanks, James. Does anyone
Mr. Chair?
have questions for Mike or James at this point regarding these various schedules we just received?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this is Bill.
Bill?
Yeah, couple of questions. You did throw a ton of numbers at us. Is there a chart? Maybe I missed it.
Bill, I'm sorry, I can barely hear you. Is anyone else having that trouble? All right, I'll be quiet then. Sorry, Andy.
You threw a lot of numbers at us. Is there any type of chart, maybe I missed it, where we have the balance in the various accounts, the goals of where we want to go, and where we're actually at?
We don't have that, but we can prepare that for you.
Okay, awesome. And I guess the second thing is when you have we're trying to get to X percent of this and Y percent of that in any thing, is that yours and James's thing, or is that something that the select board also has to kind of buy into?
Those recommendations are from, as I said, the Division of Local Services, our financial advisor, and we have sent the financial plan to the select board too, so we could get buy-in from the select board.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the Finance Committee? Okay, hearing none. We'll move on, Mike.
You're muted, Mike.
That's supposed to be Amy's supposed to tell me that. You had asked to have the public safety chiefs on to talk about some of the issues that are coming up, obviously, with police reform. And so we'll go to the senior member first, Chief Clark. And Chief Clark has a presentation to make to give you some updates.
I thought it was good looks first.
Oh, that's what it was, yeah. A little bit more hair first.
Well, good evening, everyone. Can I share the screen, Mike?
You should be able to, can you see it down the bottom, share screen? There you go.
There we go.
Okay, can everybody see the screen?
Yes.
All right, first off, good evening. Thank you for letting me take the time here to go over a few areas. I know you have a couple new members, and I'll just give you an open invitation. If anybody is, obviously a lot of information with town government, if anybody's interested in coming down or calling sidebar asking, I think it's been very helpful in the past when members have done that, so there's an open invitation. Here's police reform. Actually, this is the whole year, really, with the police reform and legislation. It's really been like drinking out of a fire hose. Obviously, we had a few things happen with George Floyd's murder, and then protests and rallies, and 129 pages of legislation that passed in December. And I think we're just starting to see a little bit about what the impact of the cost is going to be to towns. Basically, POST was created. It's a Police Officer Standard and Training Commission. There's really 23 action items with delivery dates at this time, discussing policies and training and certification and decertification of police officers. All complaints and investigations have to go to POST. Basically, since the beginning of employment, it's quite an undertaking to go through everybody's file and get that stuff ready. And then basically POST is you will review everything, and they're kind of the decision makers on, anything that happens here on in. You always use that word transparency, and I think this is what, one of the topics that POST is trying to get at. We have seen from public records requests, we have seen some dramatic increases, and it's been very time consuming. Our public records administrator is only here 12 or so hours a week. Years and years ago, 14 years ago, that was a full-time position. Then it was cut out totally, and it's really a 12-hour position. So that's something that in the future, I think we need to add some hours to that. Training is going to be a huge commitment and cost to us. Here's just some of the few things that every officer has to go through. The SROs have to go through an additional 2 days of training. Actually, they're both there today and tomorrow at a minimum. Each supervisor and OIC have to go through an additional 40 hours of training. That's really never had to happen before. When we're talking about overtime, which we'll talk about later, that's taking somebody off of a shift that will need to be backfilled. And not to mention any specialized and professional development. Accreditation, we've been an accredited department since 2014. This is soon to be mandatory. It's really not a huge deal for us because we've been doing it. We get accredited every 3 years. We were re-accredited again last year, but they are talking about adding an 18-month review period, which will be, time consuming. Just some of the functions and responsibilities we have. We handle a wide variety of calls for service, proactive traffic enforcement, administration, planning. Obviously, we're thrown into the opioid epidemic and mental health. We did start a co-responder model, and we have a clinician working with us 12 to 16 hours a week now. That's not a direct cost to us, but we are getting billed for that and using some American Recovery money. I just wanted to touch on the leadership here. Obviously, last year we had 2 retirements, and then this year we've had 2 unexpected deaths. We basically lost 130 years of experience within 13 months. So it's, again, training is going to be important. I've always used the analogy, when Bledsoe goes down, you bring in Brady, and we've been doing that. We've been training people to that standard. But, when both Bledsoe and Brady go down, it's, it's something that we have to look at retraining. Our staffing continues to be 3 officers on the road. My recommendation is to hire an additional 2 officers to plan for a vacancy or retirement that will probably come in sometime during this fiscal year, and to offset some overtime expenses. Seems like we take 1 step forward, 2 steps back, and I think you can see that we're basically down 2 positions right now because of the deaths, and it takes about 9 months to get somebody trained and on the road. We do have another officer out that's having had surgery. He'll be back sometime in October, but he's been out 3 months right now. And our midnight to 8 shift is maintained at 4 officers, 3 on the road, 1 on the desk. So each time somebody's out with a vacation day, sick day, training, it needs to be filled. I just put this together, fairly quickly. There's, roughly, I think there's some 19,000 hours or so of contractual time off. I think I calculated. It doesn't include training and backfill. Remember, back at last October, there was an additional 23 days given for military leave. That there is a cost to that. So the special policing posts. So this is kind of an interesting area where there is no more reserve intermittent academy. So as we know it, we won't be hiring any special police here on in. So we've always said like the special police are our farm club, and that's coming to an end. There are questions if we basically have 4 special police officers left. One's getting hired full time to backfill a vacancy. One I understand is going to a different state for another job, which leaves 2 special police officers. And they need to attend per post a bridge academy to bring their training up. It's about 200 hours. But there is question on if they even qualify because there's a number of law enforcement hours outside of details that they have to have as a prerequisite, and there's questions if they even qualify at this time. Kind of what that means. Well, obviously, it's gonna when our specials work, it's at a lower rate, so it's either officers will be denied time off or they'll be forced overtime at a larger rate. Recruitment and retention, we've kind of been kicking the can about civil service. I know it's been brought up before, but civil service is kind of a dying breed. There's many communities getting out of it. I just did an interview with a reporter the other day about it, and it's recruitment and retention right now. It's there's not a lot of people that are looking to get into this field. So we want to make sure we have the best and brightest candidates. And, there are certainly some barriers to civil service and finding a quality pool of candidates. Just capital real quick. A couple things. Obviously, cruises, they're very difficult to find. We've had a couple of crashes with cruises and trying to find replacements for them. There's about a 7 to 8 month delay in cruises. So, there's not only the chip, but there's not much on anybody's lots. So, the portable radios, they're not supported any longer. That's something that we've been asking for kind of regularly at some for town meetings. There'll be another request for that this year. Electronic weapons, otherwise known as tasers. We purchased several over the from 2014 to 2017. Those are now becoming out of warranty, so we'll need to look at that. And the big one is body cameras. What are we going to do in the future? That's probably the future of policing. If we were lucky enough to get a grant and everybody was on board, you're looking at $20,000 a year for the storage. The hardware should be covered by a grant, but it's something certainly in the future. Just a couple things, that we still continue to have. COVID is obviously an issue. Marijuana is right around the corner. We don't know what type of impact that's going to have. And as I mentioned, the body cameras and reform. Mandates is kind of one of those catchphrases. Everybody wants to know what the mandates are, but I think it's also what our responsibilities are, and training, staffing, public records, accreditation. And again, I mentioned hiring 2 officers, so that's kind of some areas. And with that, I'll stop talking, and through the chair, if anybody has any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
And Chief Clark, and I think it's important to bring these things ahead as we're going through these trying times. I think a lot of stuff is changing for not only you and your staff, I think, and I think it's going to have budget implications. That it's good to have these conversations. To Zach's point earlier, we have free cash today, but what are those things we need? So I didn't hear, somebody was asking a question, I think.
Yeah, it was me, Michael.
Michael, go ahead.
Hi, Chief. I have a question about, you said there will be an oversight committee
Yes.
of officers. How will that be set up? Who will be on it? Who will be the appointing body?
So there's appointments have been made through the governor and attorney general. There's a number of spots on that. They haven't They have just hired a executive director, and I'm not sure if they've hired a general counsel yet. It's really, within the last week, it hasn't really been formed. It's kind of a lot of questions on how things are going to go, what they're going to want to see for policies. I don't want to say it's too early to tell, but I think it still is. It hasn't been formulated yet.
Okay, thank you.
And Chief Clark, do you see a lot of these responsibilities coming into this upcoming year's budget?
Well, I think some will, when I've talked to the town manager about, waiting for any supplemental necessary funds on the personnel services side of the budget until potentially May. So we get a bigger look at, what we really truly might need. So we don't get, additional money in October and we may or may not need it. So, we'll probably have I think we'll have a better look at it, within the next few months, certainly probably by the first of the year to see what's going to transpire. But I don't believe they've met yet. There's not an office space located. It's really in the infancy stages.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the Finance Committee for Chief Clark?
I've got a couple, yes.
Go ahead, Joe.
Good evening, Chief. First, you mentioned in the presentation accreditations. Can you give us a quick overview on what the accreditation process is?
Sure. So accreditation is basically the best practices in the police field. It's set up by the Massachusetts Police Accreditation Commission. We became certified in 2012. Basically, there's a group of assessors who come under the commission that come in the building, look at what we have for building, for our staffing, look at what our policies and procedures are, make sure that there's a number of checklists, some 200 to 300 items that we have to. I'm just kind of looking right now for better overview. Of exactly what. The standards of policies, some 159 mandated standards that we had to pass to get accredited, and it is a group of assessors that come in and basically go through that. I can give you a little more formal overview of what that is if you like at another date.
No, that's great. I was just kind of looking to understand better like what they were looking at. My second question, I hope, is a stupid question, which is the additional officers you're looking for. That's in addition to backfilling the unfortunate losses that we had, right? We're not going to be down to is what I'm after.
So we're down 2 officers now. One backfill started the academy today. There's another backfill that'll start in November, but they won't be out of the academies and ready to go till April or May. I'm anticipating a retirement sometime in this fiscal year. So when that happens, that could happen, it could happen at any time. At that point, we'll be down 3 officers. It's tough to come back when we're down that many officers. And when you talk about overtime, that's when overtime's going to increase.
Sure. But the additions that you're talking about would be a net new 2, right? Not just the backfill.
It actually would be a net, with the retirement, it would be a net gain of 1.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Any questions for Chief Clark?
Mr. Chairman?
Zach?
Chief, couple questions on the training. Is that something you're doing in-house, or is that something you're sending guys out to be trained at a facility or a third party?
A little bit of both. Right now, in-service is online, so it's through a Zoom type of platform, which is actually a little less costly to do it the way that's being done. That's going to happen through this fiscal year. We always do our own in-house firearms and defensive tactics and use of force, and then obviously the specialty in professional development is we go outside for that.
Also, on what your slide presentation, there you said you had 19,000 hours of sick, personal, holiday, all that to fill. That's per year?
Yeah, 15,000, added up is 15,886 hours, and that doesn't include training.
And that's per year?
Yes. Well, I mean, it can, as the officers become more senior and they get more vacation, things like that, it can add up. If somebody's out, with surgery, we had a surgery last year, we had a surgery this year. I mean, that can sway the number a little bit.
So basically you need 6 or 7 guys full-time, just in theory, just to cover, if everybody's working 2,080 hours a week, 40 hours a week. You need 6 or 7 guys just to cover time off, vacations, and out of a 45 member force.
So we have, we only have 34.
34.
If we had 45, we'd need a few more cruises. Anyways, we have a staffing level, which for say the day shift, 4 to 12 shift is at 6 officers, and we go down to 4 officers. So anything, say, if 2 officers take the night off, then we don't backfill it. If a 3rd officer takes a night off, then we backfill it. So, when I say that our minimum is 3 officers on the road or 4 total officers, that's what our staffing. We certainly wouldn't fill every single hour that is contractual, but there's quite a few hours there.
And are the officers allowed to carry year after year or to retirement some of their earned time, or how does that? What's the policy?
Only 10 up to 10 vacation days a year they can carry over, and obviously sick time is accumulated. So
is it capped or is it unlimited?
Unlimited.
Okay. And is it a 1-to-1 buyout when they retire? Or?
No, it's 50%.
Okay. Thank you, Chief.
There's a maximum.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Go, Paula.
Chief Clark, with the shortage of staff and the additional trainings that you're foreseeing this year, what percentage would you, project that the overtime budget may increase?
Well, already in the spring, the overtime budget was cut $45,000. So, we're not necessarily asking for that this fall, but I would guess that, we're going to need that in this, or something close to it in the spring.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from the Finance Committee for Chief Clark? Okay, hearing none. Chief Clark, thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You as well.
And Mr. Chairman, Chief Simmons is on from the fire department.
Welcome, Chief Simmons.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. Hope you're all doing well. Thanks for the invite tonight to talk about the mandates and the regulatory agencies that we deal with our department. I have a quick 100-slide PowerPoint to show you guys. No reactions. I'm just kidding. It's only about 8 slides. All right, looks Amy's laughing. Any questions? Just jump in. As they pop into your head. If not, we can talk about it afterward. After I'm done speaking, I'm going to ask Captain Wilson, our EMS director, just to speak about the emergency medical service side of things as well. Okay, so I'll try to share my screen here. No promises. Hopefully it works. Okay.
There we
Is
go.
it coming up?
It's coming up.
Okay. Stand by. There we go. All right. We'll move on here. So I'm just going to kind of highlight some of the regulatory agencies. I'll kind of give you the high level view of how they relate to us. And again, if you want me to elaborate, just let me know. Okay. So again, first, for us, we have the collective bargaining agreement, which regulates, a lot of how we do things and what we spend money on and so forth. So obviously that covers, I know a lot of you already know this too, but for some of the new members. And also, I would echo what Chief Clark said. For any new members or even existing members, you're always welcome to stop by and talk, ask questions, or give me a call, okay? But anyway, so this covers salaries, stipends, all contractual time off, like Chief Clark was saying, vacation, personal time, sick days, so on and so forth. The scheduled working hours of the members, which also correlates to overtime. What our staffing levels are to a degree is dictated in the collective bargaining agreement. It does dictate that we have at least 2 members on each emergency apparatus that's responding to a call. There's various health and safety items in there. And there's also adoption of certain NFPA standards, which I'll get into with the next slide as we go through that are in the collective bargaining agreement, okay? So, all right, so NFPA regulates a lot of what we do, but some of it is kind of optional. There are certain things that we are required to follow, either because it's a regulation of the state or another agency, or because it's been adopted through the collective bargaining agreement. So we don't necessarily have to do all of these things word for word as it's contained in the codes in NFPA. With that being said, though, you know, if something ever happens, you know, God forbid, to a person or one of our members, these are the best practices that are nationally accepted. So this would be the standard that we would be held to, whether we have formally adopted it or not. So, and that holds true for a lot of other organizations that I'll go through in just a minute here. So. The Fire and Life Safety Code comes from NFPA. All of the professional standards, I just list some of them here that directly relate to our department: arson investigators, fire officers, technical rescue personnel, our inspectors, incident manager, incident commander, whoever's going to be in charge of the emergency. All of the qualifications are dictated in that. So it covers emergency medical services and systems, providing fire and emergency services to the public, training for emergency and operations, emergency vehicle operations. So as far as driving the fire apparatus, how are you qualified to actually drive the fire apparatus, and what, you know, training you have to do that. Operations and training for technical rescue. I can get really deep into that. I promise I won't. But there's several different disciplines for technical rescue, and we have 4 members, not including myself, that are part of the countywide technical rescue team. So we are required to send them to training monthly to keep those skills sharp, because a lot of that stuff is very technical and also very dangerous if you don't do it correctly. But anyhow, so fire department organization and deployment, that's another one that's kind of interesting. If you read that standard, it actually says that you're supposed to respond to a fire in an average 2,000 square foot house with 14 people. On our best day, we don't have 14 people. We're trying to get to a point where we can actually maintain 8 on duty right now, just to give you a little bit of a perspective, you know, on that. It also says that the first arriving emergency vehicle should be there within 4 minutes, and then the whole remaining apparatus that are responding should be there within 8 minutes. So those are just some interesting, you know, things from that part of it anyway. So protective ensembles, that's structural firefighting gear. Self-contained breathing apparatus, so obviously the air tanks and the masks that we breathe from, which is actually coming due pretty soon. For those of you that have been following Capital, we're probably a couple of years away from needing to replace all of our SCBA, and that's going to be close to $500,000. They're about $8,500 just for one of those, and if you want the tank, that's like $1,500 extra. So it's kind of crazy, but we're going to be trying to get a grant for that too. So. The automotive fire apparatus, that dictates the equipment that we have to put on our trucks, you know, when it's tested, preventative maintenance, you know, and all that kind of stuff for the trucks. Because in order for a truck to count, we call them Class A pumpers. There's a very strict requirement for how much water it has to have, how much hose it has to have, and all the other equipment and stuff as well. So use of maintenance and testing of ladders. This is preliminary, talking about ground ladders right here. So once a year, all of our ground ladders, have to be tested and passed. So it ensures that they're safe, but it also is expensive when one of them fails too. One of our average size ground ladders is probably about $2,000. So fire hose, same type of thing with fire hose. Also, active shooter is another NFPA thing as well that is pertinent to us, unfortunately, nowadays. So, okay. All right, moving on here. So the Mass Department of Labor Standards, which is basically like OSHA, they follow all the same regulations of OSHA. It's kind of like OSHA version from Massachusetts. Okay, we were previously exempt as a municipality. February of 2019, they required all municipalities to come on board and become compliant with the state OSHA regulations. So I'm just hitting the really highlights here. Believe it or not, there's a ton of them if you really look through it. So, but for structural firefighting, it covers specific training for every job function that a member could be expected to have to do. Quarterly assessment of firefighters in education to assure proficiency in all of those things that I just mentioned. Standard operating guidelines a while back, and we're still in the process of doing it now. Our average standard operating procedure, our standard operating guideline was about 25 years old, about 3 years ago. So we're working diligently to try to bring all those up to date with best practices. So we're doing pretty well. Fire equipment maintenance is referenced in there as well. So you see some of these things carry over from NFPA and OSHA, like some of them overlap a little bit as well. Ladder trucks, policies and training records, fall arrest systems for personnel that are carrying, that are climbing the ladder. We don't have a system where they're tied off when they're actually climbing the ladder. When you see the individuals climbing the ladder, they're actually free climbing the ladder, but when they stop, they have to have a system to tie off onto that. So as far as medical, there's a whole bunch of medical stuff. This is just some of the high points, physical and fitness records, comprehensive respirator program, which if I put on here, it's actually about 20 pages long. But that's for people to be able to wear the SCBAs, and technically even N95s fall into that category as well. Hepatitis B vaccines, use of safer needle devices, which we've been doing for a long time anyway. Hazard communication programs for chemicals, heat stress, prevention programs for fire scenes, ladder inspections and training. Again, that overlaps NFPA. Personal protective equipment, traffic incident management, and they're really big on comprehensive documentation and record keeping. So, and they can come in at any time and request to see that we're doing all these things and that we have proper documentation over it. So, okay. The slides get smaller as we go, by the way. So, civil service. I know Chief Clark's mentioned civil service before too. And a lot of you are probably familiar with it, but civil service, if you don't know, it dictates our procedures for hiring and promotions. It's all done with different types of exams. Excuse me, for entry-level positions, it's a biannual entry exam. So they do a written exam, and then they do a practical exam, and that's combined, and the scores are weighted to come up with their final score. So that's what we're working with. It also requires a physical agility test and a physical exam that the hiring department has to pay for. So that's about $1,000 right there for every time we hire somebody. So in addition, it also dictates transfers from other departments. So if we have somebody that wants to transfer from another department, the mayor or town manager or the fire chief over there has to sign off on that, as do we, to accept that transfer. So we're very fortunate. We actually just got 2 transfers from Attleboro that were appointed a couple of weeks ago. So we're very fortunate about that. Civil service is extremely difficult nowadays. I think like Chief Clark had mentioned, it's getting really difficult to hire people. Some of you probably heard me talk about that previously. We called for a civil service list about 2 weeks ago. Nobody's at all signed up for it. So I'm sent out the list again to 254 people from across the state. And right now, I think we have 2 people signed up for it. So we'll see how that goes. But we're trying to aggressively fill our openings and trying to be as creative as we can to accomplish that. So, all right, moving on here. Mass General Law, Chapter 148 is what dictates the laws for the fire department. It gives the fire department its authority and specific laws to be enforced. So it also dictates what permits that we can grant, which ones we have to, and to some extent with certain permits, how much we can actually charge for them. It tells us what inspections are required. So for example, like schools, hotels, boarding houses, that sort of thing. Anybody licensed by the Department of Public Health or Public Welfare, we have to inspect those quarterly. It's required for us to do. Also fire drills. So I don't know if Dr. Bayette is still on, but we have to do that. We're not trying to touch you yet. And we're required to do 4 fire drills a year at each school, and that also includes preschools as well. So that keeps us pretty busy just doing all that, And then 527 CMR 1 is adopted by this Mass General Law, Chapter 148, and that adopts NFPA 1 as the state fire code. And in turn, that also pulls a lot of other NFPA codes in as well that are referenced through NFPA 1. So, okay. All right, just a couple of other regulatory agencies. Insurance Safety Office, it's commonly called ISO. I'm not sure if anybody has heard about it before. I think I might have mentioned it previously. What it does is it actually evaluates fire departments and gives them a score. The score is from 1 to 10. It's kind of the opposite of what you would think. The lowest score is the best. And currently we're at a 3. The insurance carriers then use this score to dictate or, determine what rates they want to give commercial businesses or homeowners and that sort of thing. Not probably quite as much for homeowners, but some insurance companies do use that for homeowners. But most certainly, just about every commercial insurer is going to look at that rate. It has to do with all different things: staffing, station locations, water supply. I don't want to bore you and break down everything, but we're I think the highest possible score is like a 105.5, and last evaluation we had was about a year and a half, couple of years ago, and we scored like a 70.4, I want to say. So we just barely made a 3 this time around. Just ironically, when the gentleman came down to evaluate us, we had Station 1 open for that brief period of time, and had we not, we would have went up in the rating, which would have put us in the wrong direction, and we would have went up to a 4. So. Department of Public Safety, Department of Fire Services, Office of Emergency Medical Services, and the Department of Public Health, and the FDA. I'll let Captain Wilson talk a little bit more about those things, but those also play a really, really big role in oversight for our department. So that's the last slide I had for you. Hopefully y'all still awake.
Absolutely.
If you have any questions, I'm happy to do my best to answer them for you.
Yeah, just one quick question. I just want to
Sure.
ISO. The lower the number, the better it is.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Amy.
quick question, Chief Simmons. For the self-contained breathing apparatus, is
Yep.
there a rationale why we replace them all at once versus cycling through them, X
Yeah,
amount of
well,
steps per
yes,
year?
and no. We could cycle through. The tough part about that is with our self-contained breathing apparatus, ideally they change from model to model, right? And I think the NFPA code is if it goes to after 3 new models come out, you have to switch over to the next one, right? That's how it determines out of service. And the bottles themselves only last for 10 years. I think to your point, I think maybe considering doing the bottles for the SCBA might be a really good idea. As far as the SCBA themselves, I would really not prefer to have people wearing different types of SCBAs. So, you get into one truck and you got the new one, and then the other truck has 2 models ago. Because for us, we always teach, like if hopefully you've never been in a fire, but you can't see anything when you're inside of a fire. You're limited on hearing, dexterity, all that stuff. So a lot of the stuff that we do is by feel. So for emergency procedures for us, it's really important for individuals to be able to just kind of go by feel. Okay, I know my gauge is here. I know my regulator is here. I know this disconnect is over here, and that sort of thing. If that makes sense.
That absolutely makes sense.
I think that's a good idea. The bottles, a bottle's a bottle, so I think we could certainly maybe look at that, and that would certainly decrease some of the big hit type of costs. But
Right. I just would hate for you guys to have to replace everything in a year that we don't have $4.2 billion in free cash.
Right, I totally get it. So we are going to try to go for an assistance for firefighters grant for that. When you apply for those grants, they always have the priorities rated from high, low, medium. If you don't pick a high priority, you're not going to get anything anyway. But that's usually one of their highest priorities, like personal protective equipment and SCBA. The things that really tie into life safety. So I don't want to get anybody's hopes up, but I think we have at least a fair chance of getting that grant. But we certainly won't know if we don't try. So the worst they can say is no. And
Absolutely.
So we're about maybe 2 years away from needing them. Not that we probably couldn't stretch it another year or two if we absolutely had to. But my thought process, if we start putting in for the grant now and we don't get it this year, that gives us another year to put in for the grant and try again. So.
Awesome. Thank you.
No problem.
Does anyone else on the finance committee have any questions for Chief Simmons at this point? Okay, Chief Simmons, thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Pleasure seeing y'all. Take care.
Same here. Be safe.
Okay, everybody can hear me, I hope?
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna try to share my screen. I hope I'll be able to do this. Mine will be quicker than Chief Simmons, I promise. Everybody can see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so
Chief just wanted me to go over some of the mandates. Oops, I'm sorry. Some of the mandates we have on the EMS side. And I guess the nice part about it is just about everything we do EMS wise is mandated by the state. So in one sense, it's easy because everything's written exactly what you have to do. And then obviously other situations are a little more complicated. So when we talk about the ambulances themselves, every ambulance is mandated by what we call the KKK specifications. It's the ground vehicle standards for ambulances. It's about a 63-page book that basically tells you everything that you have to have on an ambulance. It goes right down to, what type of locks you have to have in the doors, what you have to have for equipment. Basically right down to how many Band-Aids we have are all mandated by the state with the type and the amount. So really, everything we do is regulated, is mandated by, for the ambulance, the KKK specs. One of the things that we're running into now is because the chassis are such a, they're really tough to get. It's taken about a year to get the chassis in at this point. It's just one of those things where they're specially made for ambulances. It's not like you can go and get like a regular truck chassis and all of it has to do with because of the mandated specifications. It's not like we can just go to a dealer and take a chassis off the lot and then make it into an ambulance. There's certain things the chassis has to have in order to be an ambulance. So that's always a problem with us. Usually when we start talking to the manufacturers, it's usually about a year before they can even get the actual chassis in, and then they can start building the box because they won't start building the back of it until they have the chassis in stock. As far as preventative maintenance contracts, one of the first things that the state inspectors do when they come out yearly to check the ambulances is they grab all the preventative maintenance contracts we have. It's required for us to have them. Everything is written into the manufacturer's specifications. Our cardiac monitors have to be tested once a year. The stretchers have to be tested, the power load systems, stair chairs, scoop stretchers. The company has to come in and they have to, make sure everything is working correctly. Obviously, if something's broke, they have to repair it. And we have to have paperwork saying that whatever the piece of equipment is has passed that and is able to be used on patients. As far as the training, the paramedics and the EMTs are under a 2-year cycle, so they have to recertify every 2 years. Continuing education, seems to increase every year, but they basically have to have an NCCR, which is kind of like a refresher on all the subjects that you went over from the initial training. Then there's continuing education, things that they require you to go over. Some of it is they can pick themselves, but a lot of the stuff is mandated by the state on what they have to go over. We have to have yearly infection control. Obviously, CPR, the advanced providers, the paramedics have to have advanced cardiac life support and also pediatric advanced life support that we require them to do. And that's a 2-year recertification also. So when you look at like the EMTs for a 2-year cycle, it's about 47 hours of training. So it equals about 282 hours of training. And with the paramedics, having 34 paramedics right now, equals about 81 hours of training. And that comes out to about 2,754 hours of training that they have to do every 2 years that's required. Along with that, we have a medical director. Our medical director currently is Dr. Brian Patel out of Sturdy Hospital. And the medical directors can really dictate as much training as they want. They usually keep it to M&M rounds, which basically is they go over all the calls that we've transported, the people that we transported, and they go over and they basically just do like a peer review with it. And they also require an ALS skill workshop once a year. And what that workshop does is the skills that the paramedics might not have got in that year's time, they make the paramedics practice it in a lab-based type scenario. So for the medical rounds, the medical director requires every paramedic to have 5 per year. They're about 2 hours per round, so it's about 10 hours each that a paramedic has to do per year. So that equals about 340 hours yearly. And then the ALS workshop is done once a year for 4 hours, and between all the paramedics, it equals about 136 hours yearly. We also have to have a quality assurance program. We have to have people reviewing every call that the ambulance goes on to make sure that they are complying with the protocols, making sure that the person was transported to the correct facility, making sure everything was done correctly. We have a company that actually does the initial review of it, and then we'll flag certain ones, and myself and my assistant will review these calls, and then we have to go back to the person. And, in some cases we have to figure out, maybe why the protocol, was not followed. Maybe there was something else, some mitigating factors as far as that goes. But we do about 2,100 calls per year, so every one of those calls has to be critiqued, has to go through the quality assurance program, which takes us about 6 hours per week to accomplish that. The licenses, as the chief spoke about earlier, licenses are on a 1-year recertification, so we have to be licensed by the Department of Public Health for the ambulance, and then we also have to be licensed by the FDA to carry medications. And they make us have a license for the FDA at headquarters in Chartley. And then with that, not only do they charge for the licenses, but they also charge to come out and inspect the vehicles. So that's a fee that's incurred every year. That, again, everything I've talked about up to this point, we don't have a choice. We have to do this stuff. You know, it's not nothing that I'm talking about is like voluntarily. We have to do it. And there's always a fee with that. Communications and medications, as I'm sure you can understand, technology is a huge thing. When you throw HIPAA in tune with that, that makes everything more expensive as far as the computers that we use. I mean, for a regular call, we're using iPads as far as the dispatch. We're using computers as far as the patient records. We're using an iPhone to actually send the information into the hospital. There's a program called Triage that they actually go in there and put the information in and it sends it to the hospital. We also have to do telemetry. So if there's, you know, a certain type of heart attack a person is having and the paramedic wants to send that to the hospital for review, they might send that in and then the hospital will tell us to go to a different facility that might be more appropriate for that person. There's also medications that are mandated. I'm sure people have heard all the costs with EpiPens. We have to have 12 basically on the vehicles, and they're about $460 each, which just on a side note, they expire once a year. So that's like a one-time thing that you have to spend every year, and they only give you like a year as far as expiration. So that's just one example of some of the mandated medications that we have to have. It's just that one's quite expensive. So, but there's several others. We carry about 42 different medications that we can administer in the ambulance. And then the last thing was the hospital transports. We've come a long ways from, you know, even 10 or 15 years ago. Most of the patients went to the local hospital, the closest hospital. Now, because a local hospital in some cases can't handle that specific patient, whether it's a person having a heart attack, maybe a person having a stroke, maybe a person who has like multi-system trauma that has to go to a different hospital. So what ends up happening with this is, because that's mandated for us to go to the most appropriate hospital and not the actual closest hospital, this in turn increases the turnaround time. In most cases, if they transport to Sturdy, once they get there and they drop the patient off and they clean up the ambulance, they're pretty much in service. They can turn around really quick if they have to. So, you know, average time from the time the call comes in till they clear Sturdy in most cases is about 30 minutes, maybe about 45 minutes tops, and they'd be able to respond back. A little bit different if they're, say, at like Rhode Island Hospital, which is a 17-mile, takes 17 miles for us to get there. That might be upwards to an hour and a half to a 2-hour turnaround. Even Good Samaritan in Brockton, again, really can't have the ambulance responding from Brockton with lights and siren because it's really not going to be safe. So a lot of times that's going to increase the turnaround time of the ambulance. We will, on occasion, go to Boston hospitals with specialty patients that might be, you know, having to go to Mass General because they have a specialty medical condition, or someone maybe that has cancer that's getting treatment at Dana-Farber. It doesn't make sense to go to a local hospital if all their doctors are at that specialty facility, because they're just going to be transferred out of Sturdy once they get there, or Morton Hospital if we bring them there. So it just kind of makes sense in some cases to bring the people up there. We don't do it all the time, but we try to provide this to our residents. So when you increase the special medical conditions, that increases the turnaround time, and in turn, that takes 2 or 3 people right out of the staffing. So when other calls come in, obviously we have to backfill the stations, and you know the chief has all the stats as far as that goes and what that costs per year, or the additional cost it does when we have to transport to a further facility. I believe that's about all that I have, unless anybody has any questions on the EMS side of it.
Yeah. Any questions from the Finance Committee?
I have a couple, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Zach.
The EMS side, Sean, you said you were at 8 guys. That includes the EMS?
We're trying to maintain 8 guys. We fluctuate between 7 and 8 based on, you know, what the budget's looking like, how many open slots we have, if there's anybody injured. So all those things impact, you know, the level that we can actually fill to. But yeah, 7 to 8.
But that includes everybody. That includes the paramedics, to run
That's
these
correct.
ambulances?
Yep, that includes the shift commander, the captain. It doesn't include like myself or the deputies who are working days here, but obviously, quite honestly, sometimes I've gone out and done medical calls by myself in my
So-
car while one of the deputies goes out and does another medical call, because sometimes it's weird. It's Murphy's Law. Like you just, all of a sudden we're running like 4 calls at one time, out of the blue.
You're right. So you're running 2 ambulances? Is that what we have in town?
Yes, sir. Yep, that's correct. Yeah,
So
we
you have-
actually have 3 ambulances, but one of them is a mechanical spare. So that when one ambulance goes down, we have another one that we can replace it with.
So if you have 2 guys out on medical calls, you got 4 guys left at the station to deal with any fires or anything else? If you
We
have 2
should have at
ambulances
least-
out?
Yeah, I mean, if we're at 8, we should have at least 6, hopefully,
I'm saying if you got both ambulances out.
Oh, yeah, correct. That's correct. Right.
Okay.
And think
second-
about, not to get into the weeds, but when you think about like in some respects, like when I'm thinking in my head how we're going to manage a call, I don't really even think about the captain as counting towards manpower, because when they go to a fire, so, when I leave the station tonight, if a fire comes in, that captain is managing that whole incident basically by himself until, myself and the other deputies get there to try to help out a little bit. So that person really you can't be inside fighting a fire and running the incident at the same time, unless somebody's going to die if you don't run into the building, you know what I mean? So,
Okay. And the second thing is, all the mandates, everything you mentioned, a lot of costs. We got all that.
Mhm.
But the ambulances are a paid for service. It's not a service that you provide for free. So is there some kind of P&L that you guys run to say, okay, this is what it costs to do our ambulances. This is what we should be charging. How do you guys work what the fees are to pick me up, to take me to, I don't know, Brockton Hospital versus, how does that all
yeah,
work?
no, I think that's
more
a
like
great
a-
question.
It's more like a
I'll start
business
to-
than it is, the fire department. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I get you. I think that's a great question. I'll start to answer it, and Captain Wilson maybe can fill in if I leave anything out. But every year, at worst every 2 years, we evaluate our ambulance rates and we compare them with other communities that are similar to us. We also get reports generated by our ambulance billing company that provides us with the rates that of every customer that they have, ambulance services. We don't compare ourselves to privates, but fire department-based ambulance services. And part of that is also based on what they call the payer mix too. So the payer mix, Captain Wilson may be able to articulate a little bit better than me on this, but it's basically, what percentage of people have like an HMO versus Medicare versus Mass Health and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of factored in, as well. So we do stay on top of the ambulance rates and try to, increase them at the proper pace without, making it extremely difficult for our citizens too. But when a citizen can't pay, we work with them. If they have a financial hardship, we'll write that off. So there's definitely, we don't get paid for every single ambulance call we going on. And if it's a Medicare call, generally there's a flat rate. It might be like $500. It don't matter. You can bill them for $6,000. Doesn't matter. You're getting paid $500. So you take it or leave it, right? So we get a lot of that too. So that all factors in. And the last thing I'll say, just to kind of hopefully answer your question, is, we don't, even though we bill and we take $700,000 a year out of the ambulance account to supplement our budget, we're not like, if we were a private ambulance company, we would not be profitable right now, right? So, and that's just the way it is, right? But Captain Wilson actually does a great job for us. And the last year, for the first time, we put in for, and I think I've told some of you before, that CPE program, and we actually got $134,000 back for just filling out some paperwork. And it's much more complicated than that. It's like 30 pages and it's a bunch of numbers, but we had to tell them, how much gas we use, what electricity we use, and all that kind of stuff. And that program was actually developed to help offset, the operating costs that weren't funded through your billing, So we're going to keep applying for that every year and keep doing that. And hopefully we'll keep getting roughly the same amount, but that did help. That did kind of force us to look into our operating expenses, because I don't think it had been done previously before that, to that level of detail anyway.
And these ambulances cost what, $200,000-300,000?
You're looking at probably about $350,000, $360,000 for an equipped ambulance.
And how many years do you get out of that, roughly?
Roughly probably about 6 years. What we normally try to do is we move we'll call it Rescue 1 into, the new ambulance becomes Rescue 1. when we replace that one, that rescue one now becomes rescue two, and we kind of after that it goes to be in the mechanical spare, and we kind of rotate them through like that. But we used to get probably almost 8 years out of an ambulance, probably 15 years ago. But our call volume continues to go up. Our call volume went up for ambulance calls about 6% just last year. We're definitely not getting any slower. I can tell you that. So as more mileage gets put on those ambulances, they don't last as long, unfortunately.
So you don't see a scenario.
They cost, but
guys don't see a scenario where you can bring that, at least a service, to a break even, to say, we're going to spend $5 million a year, we're going to take in $5 million a year.
That'd be something I wouldn't want to tell you.
No, I mean, you don't
off the cuff. But I would be happy to. A while back when we were doing capital, I'm not sure if you were on that. One of the things I suggested was for us to do, a staffing and needs assessment for the department that basically evaluates all of that kind of stuff. Our stations in the right spot? Is that staffing adequate? Do we need more office personnel? Do we need more people on the line, and so on and so forth? But I can tell you that I've read a lot of those things because I'm a dork, I guess, and I sit up and read those things at night. But I can tell you what most of them are gonna say. They're gonna say you need another person on days. You need 2 more people, on the line, and that kind of stuff. But if you're looking at specifically to answer your question, that would be something that'd be very detailed to look into. So I think we probably have to probably seek some assistance for that. But they're expensive. It's like $50,000 to do one of those studies.
Yeah.
I'd also, not to get off on another track, but while I'm rambling here, is I know the police department's accredited, and I would love to. For the past couple of years, I'd love to get us started down that path. But again, that's pretty expensive as well. So.
Thanks, Chief.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for the question.
With that said, how much of the ambulance receipts is uncollectible?
I don't know. Mike's still on, but I'm going to say that our collection rate is probably somewhere between 85 to 90%.
About right.
Yeah.
If you look at direct collections, if you look at what's billed out versus what we actually get when the insurance companies dictate that, it's obviously about 50% less.
Okay. And then what's the process to actually, when you say eliminate a debt or cancel a debt, who makes that decision ultimately? Is it you as the chief, or is it a group of people?
It's myself and Captain Wilson that'll typically collaborate on that, and we have paperwork that they need to fill out with the reason that they can't pay, and some proof of income and that sort of thing. And sometimes we'll work out a payment. Sometimes we'll work out a payment plan, with somebody, and then depends on what the situation is.
Okay,
but
that's all documented.
Yes,
That's
absolutely.
all documented with an audit trail and.
Correct. Absolutely. Yeah, and we do that for our town residents.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how much was written off of that scenario last year?
Off the top of my head, I don't have that answer for you. I don't know if Captain Wilson knows off the top of his head, but I can certainly find that out and get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Are you looking at just write-offs, complete write-offs with bills that came in that were completely written off? Is that you're looking
Completely
for?
written off, correct.
Yeah, I can get that number for the chief
thank
and
you.
give it to you.
Does the finance committee have any other questions for the chief or the captain? Okay, hearing none, thank you both very much and be safe.
All right. Good questions. I appreciate it. Y'all have a good night.
Well,
Bye-bye.
Mr. Chairman.
okay, Michael.
The next topic, Article 1, prior year bill, $1,935.01. This is 2 bills from boiler equipment for the work at the police department. Brian called them because his AC wasn't working, so they had to come over. But basically, unfortunately, this work was done in May and June, but the company was slow in their billing. So these 2 bills will be prior year bill, and the payment of these will be out of the current municipal building account.
I guess I'll ask the committee, do we want to hold off on voting these? I know we're gonna do our reorg. Do we have a preference on voting these now or after the reorg? Hearing no comment, I guess nobody had to, okay. Okay. Does anyone on the finance committee have any questions pertaining to this prior year bill? All right, hearing none, I will call for a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Amy,
I move that we recommend Article 1 in the amount of $1,935.01.
Mr. Chair, excuse me.
Michael Fiore,
Yep, we need to get an account number where the money is going to go into in the motion.
There isn't gonna be any money appropriated. It's just gonna come out of the existing account. So you're just authorizing us to pay prior year bills.
Okay.
Yeah.
okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. I think was that Kevin? To recommend. Trying to find the amount.
$1,935.
$1,935 municipal building for a prior year bill. Any other conversation, discussion? Hearing none, call for a vote. Amy?
Yes.
Michael Fiore?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Frank?
Aye.
Kevin?
Yes.
Paula?
Yes.
Zach?
Yes.
Bonnie?
Yes.
Yelena?
Yes.
Oh, yes, that's unanimous.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is a petition article, and I'll put it up on the screen, and I know the petitioner is on. This is an article, a petition article, and I think William Francis is on the meeting, so he can discuss this article.
Thank you very much. First of all, let me say, quite an interesting meeting. I've never sat through a finance meeting before, but quite interesting. So I propose to extend the mandatory time to connect to the common sewer from 5 years to 10 years. I want to do this mainly because this law was passed before COVID hit, and this is cut very deeply into this time frame since we've been in this situation now for 18 months, and it has certainly created a lot of, well, what can I say, anxiety, uncertainty with anyone at all who's been impacted by this virus, and I think we all have. And it looks like the future isn't going to be that great either. I mean, I don't have, I can't tell the future, but from the facts that are coming out now, COVID cases on the rise. There's there's the question of the number of jobs that they were hoping to fill from 748,000, and they only filled 238,000. This would be nationwide. It's going to have an impact across the entire nation. So I don't think this particular, we can raise this to 10 years. I don't think it's going to have any impact, a minimal impact at the most, on any revenues from the connection fees. And I think it will give homeowners a lot more time to save up for the money in the case that they can't get the 20-year loan at a low interest rate. Not all of us can. And then it also will help us to avoid the $100 a day fine that's imposed upon us if we don't sign up within the 5 years. If I just may, this whole the idea that because people could have connected to this common sewer beforehand, before the driver struck with that, but then that would negate 5 years that we had to tie in, and if just to get an idea, since you're finance people, that to save the money, and the cost is going to vary. $100 a week comes out to $5,200 a year, and times 4 years, you get $20,800, and after 5 years, you get $26,000. Now that might cover the cost for some of the people who have to tie in and save up the money who don't get the loan. But in the event of this COVID, which is going on for 18 months, maybe some of that money has to be used because they lost their employment. Their employment was reduced. There was illness in the family that prevented them from working. Maybe there was a sudden death in the family. There's a lot of reasons why, and all of them are, are impactful to this, to carrying out this particular time frame to connect to the common sewer.
Okay. Does anyone on the finance committee have questions for Mr. Francis at this time? Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Is that Amy? Go ahead, Amy.
I'm not sure I have a question for Mr. Francis. I do have a question for Mike Units. I'm wondering what the parameters of I know there were low interest loans available for these connections. And I know we discussed this when the sewer project was happening. I just don't remember all of the details. So I don't know if that's something that we should get Frank in to talk us through again, or, what the best way to walk through this is. But I'm just a little fuzzy on what the change being recommended is changing from.
Yeah, I do. I think you should have Frank in to talk about what he feels the impact will be for water and sewer. And we can have the health agent in to talk about any loans that are available that people could use to tie in.
That would be
I'm sorry.
Oh, Mr. Francis.
Well, over here on Plain Street where I am, we have a different circumstance, of course. We have to tie in. We don't get any loans. We don't get any sort of 20 years paid off at a low interest rate. The only thing that we do receive is from the health department, where we would get a low interest loan just to run the line from the house to the street. Now, the other part of it is, and we've worked with my neighbors, and I have tried to work with the water and sewer department, and but it never went anywhere. It was less than enthusiasm. Is that this has to do with Wheaton College, and apparently, from my understanding of it all, Wheaton College paid to have the sewer line run from Wheaton College after their system failed they're tying to the sewer line here that runs out of Mansfield. There's a lot of houses. I don't know the exact number, but just roughly, we say there's 60 houses that actually this common sewer runs by. Now, for some reason, I don't know why, that they cannot tie in. I mean, I know why they can't tie in. It's because the system was designed and pressurized so that it can't tie in until it comes up to to LG North, then it's fed by gravity feed down the hill. So everyone on this side of the street has to, that's gravity fed, has to tie in. Now, we talked to the water department, and they talked about the cost and the fees and who's going to pay for this, which is a good question, because I'd like to know who exactly paid for it. But also the fact that by bypassing just 65 houses, then the water and sewer department passed $1,750,000 in fees. There's a lot here that doesn't add up. But I'm mostly interested in to ensure that myself and my neighbors do have access to some sort of funds that we can tie in, that we can use to connect to, so that we can connect to the common sewer. And also, well, that's the reason why. I mean, that's basically it. Like I said, I don't know what the future is going to bring. This thing could sort of flourish again, COVID, and I've heard a number of conversations over this evening where they said through these crazy times, and it has been a crazy time. And and just to give you an idea, on the personal stories, the people who have to tie in, they're retired people, they're disabled vets, they're single parents. I mean, you have to see the human side of it. And I would appreciate if the town or the finance committee could do something to help these people out over on this side of the Plain Street. Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Francis. Thank you for bringing it to our attention. We will get the appropriate parties together and hear the whole conversation and make our determination at that point. So really appreciate you bringing this forward.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Okay, you have a great night and be safe.
You also.
And we will be in touch.
All right, thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman?
And Mike Eunice, when we do have the meeting on this, will Mr. Francis be notified of when that meeting date will be directly?
Yes, I'll make sure I notify him.
All right, thank you.
Can I ask a question on this, Mr. Chairman?
Sorry, Zach, I thought I heard something. Go ahead, Zach.
So I guess, I don't know if this is for Mike, but who sets the policy? Where did this policy come from on these sewer lines? Is it the water sewer department? Is it the selectmen? I mean, I live over here, on my street. The town decides to put a sewer line out front, and my septic system works fine. All of a sudden, I'm on the hook for 20 grand or 25 grand. I mean, I think the policy is flawed to begin with, in my view. I mean, those people didn't ask for that. The neighbors have to have it, don't have to have it, they do. How is that? The policy is flawed to begin with. I mean, that guy was very calm, because I wouldn't be, that you put out in front of my house. I'd be with a pitchfork down at town hall. But, so who comes up with this policy?
So I think you might have two questions there. The first thing is on the tie-in. It used to be 2 years, and a previous select board proposed that be changed to 5 years, and town meeting approved that several years ago. It went from 2 years to 5 years for the requirement to tie in. And then as far as any fees that are charged, that is determined by the Water and Sewer Commission, what those fees are. So in the past, all their projects were done by a tie-in fee based on the number of bedrooms in a dwelling. The last project on West Main Street, they did betterments, which is a good way to go, because betterments, when the sewer line goes down, betterments are attached to a property, and it's paid off over 20 years, whenever the people sell the home or have to tie in. If they sell the home, the betterments get paid off, or they can pay them over 20 years, or they can take, if they don't want a lien, some people don't want a lien on their property forever, and they'll pay it off sooner, but at least you start getting money from day one. But as far as what they charge, as far as those tie-in fees, that's a Water and Sewer Commission decision.
And the policy is the Board of Selectmen that came up with this policy to mandate that the homeowner pay?
No.
Who created this mandate? Yeah, who's demanding, who voted on the tie-in? Who's making that requirement?
That was a town meeting decision several years ago. It changed it from 2 years to 5 years.
Okay, so, and the 2 years, going back even further history, was set up at town meeting. Somebody proposed this.
every community that has sewer has a deadline that you have to tie in, because it doesn't make sense for a town to put a sewer line in that no one's going to tie into. It doesn't make sense to have that expense and then not have it used. So every community has some sort of deadline.
Thanks.
Yep.
Any other discussion at this point on this article? Okay, hearing none, we'll move forward. Mike, sorry, I won't say it, but
the other, we have another petition article, and I know the proponent for this article is on. And while they start talking, I will put it up on my screen. This is a home rule petition seeking to add 2 more all alcohol licenses. So this would be for all alcohol beverages not to be drunk on the premises. So in other words, a liquor store. And we currently have no licenses available for all alcohol in Norton. And this proposal is to add 2. And I think the proponent is on and could talk on this.
Thank you, Michael. For the record, my name is David Waluka. I'm here on behalf of proponent SNH Development. We have a lease in place with Condyne for the front of the project that is going to be a series of retail establishments. My client has a lease in place for about a 5,000 square foot package store subject to a license being available. When I first inquired of Mr. Units, the town has its limit of licenses that are regulated by the state based on population. And there had been discussions before my call about adding some licenses to the town. The reason there are 2 here is because I learned from Mr. Units and through the selectmen that if they're going to ask for 1, they would ask for 2, 1 at the other end of town. That's why 2 are in the petition. Because this was not something the selectmen could do, I was told to get a 10 taxpayers petition, which I went out and did. Mr. Units helped in drafting the actual language, and the 10 taxpayers have been certified by the town clerk. Once again, we have a lease in place subject to the petition. This is not new for me. We just did one in Plainville and are about to do one in Rainham. These home rule petitions are very, very common. And there is talk in the legislature about giving the towns back the right to choose how many package stores, restaurants, beers and wines, all of those things they want, as opposed to having to go to the state every time when you don't have enough. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I've got this. This is going to be, my clients own a number of these around Massachusetts and Rhode Island. This will be a high-end first-class package store. It's about 5,000 square feet. It'll have, some of the food that goes, crackers and meats and delis and things that are part of a high-end package store. And just looking forward to building it from scratch at that property. Be happy to answer any questions.
Mike Units, can you just explain high level the current process today to get a liquor license? And then with this home rule petition, it seems like it gives the local authorities a little bit more leeway on, I'll call it an exception basis. And then the other part of that, I'm not sure who can speak to, we determined 1, I understand there's potentially a building going in there that's 5,000 square feet. But then what was the rationale going in to select something on the other side of town? And what went into that decision? And then the other part, this conversation started last year, I believe, and is this a different conversation than potentially an article that was withdrawn?
Okay. So right now, if someone wants a liquor license, they have to apply through the Board of Selectmen. That's if we have them available. And the Board of Selectmen has a hearing, and then they issue the license to that particular person. And obviously, right now, we don't have any available. And the reason for going for 2 was a recommendation when we did this. The select board was looking at it before, and Senator Feeney had suggested that if you're going for 1 license, you should go for 2, so there isn't legislation just for 1.
Okay. And for the record, we have no interest, have a location or an interest for the second license. We came to the town looking just for 1 at the Condyne site.
And at one point, there was some discussion with the Board of Selectmen. I know Selectman Bramwell's concern was that if we went over 20,000 in population, that we'd automatically get 1 license, and now we'd be getting 3. But we did not go over 20,000 in population. The population only went up like 125 people or something. I'm not sure the exact number off the top of my head, but we didn't reach 20,000, so we do not get an additional license.
And so even going forward, we get the licenses from the state, or in this case, if the town approves this article,
right,
2 licenses, but the committee or the board is the select board that'll award those licenses based on their particular vetting, which, not for this, but I'd like to understand that vetting, because I think there was conversations the last time came up, so, okay, thank you.
So yeah, if town meeting approves this, then the selectmen would have to make a decision on sending the legislation to the State House, and then the State House would have to pass it. And then if they do authorize 2 additional licenses, then someone could apply for a permit and come back to the board.
Okay. Has the select board discussed this article at this time?
Very, very little. They still have some more discussion on this.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, for the record, this allows us, if the legislation passes, this allows us to apply following all the rules and regulations of the town, the select board, and of course the ABCC. So it isn't that we're being awarded a license with legislation. It simply allows us to apply for it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Bill, did I hear you with a question?
Yes. This is probably to Mike. So I know, I think it was last spring when, Renee, and it's not called the IDC anymore, but, whatever they're called,
EDC,
brought about the whole marijuana, establishments. The number of those establishments was tied some fraction of the number of liquor establishments in your town. So if we're increasing this by 2, does that now allow the marijuana establishments to increase by 1?
1. It does.
So we're kind of doing a 2-for-1 here. No pun intended, but that's what we're doing.
Yep. And I would suggest to the proponent that they present this to the Economic Development Committee.
But I guess my point is, when we're perhaps discussing this, you can't discuss it in a vacuum because it directly impacts some other industry. So,
No, you're right.
I'm not I'm not for or against, or I'm not publicly saying for or against, but voting on this directly impacts something else, and we're not really discussing that in this petition where I think you should.
Mm-hmm. And as I said, the Board of Selectmen the other night would like to see an opinion from the Economic Development Council, I believe. So this should be presented to them also.
Be happy to do that. Yeah, to Mr. Rotundi's question, if one more license wouldn't trigger what you're concerned about, I'm perfectly satisfied to have one more license. The two licenses were again at the suggestion of Mr. Feeney and through the Board of Selectmen. We didn't petition for originally or have an interest in a second license.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Amy?
I got a couple of questions on this. The first question is, are any of our other liquor licenses restricted geographically this way?
No.
Because the current geographic outline puts these two licenses in direct competition with other established liquor stores in those specific corridors.
Yeah, I know when this was looked at by the EDC and the Board of Selectmen, that was one of the reasons for not recommending one on 140, because you had Norton Liquors, Produce Barn, you had the gas station, all have licenses. I think there are 3 all alcohol and 2 beer and wine licenses on 140, if I'm not mistaken. And on East Main Street, you have 1 beer and wine license in that area. And on West Main Street, I think you have 1 license at Michelle's.
Right.
If I could add to that answer, the legislation requires that you designate the area where the licenses are going to be located. You can't ask for a license to go anywhere in town. We just got one in Plainville, and we're applying for one in Rainham as well. And when the legislative council looks at it, the attorneys look at it, also want to make sure that that we're not favoring someone in particular with a license. So they ask those kinds of questions. So the reason it's located here is because it has to be, well, obviously we want this one at the Condyne site. It won't be a freestanding building, by the way. There will be a retail strip there that the whole front is reserved for, and there will be other things as well. We'll just be one of probably 4 or 5 retail establishments there. But the legislature requires, the statute requires you designate broadly where the license is going to go.
Okay. How liberally do they award these at the state level? Is this like kind of we fill out the paperwork and the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed and we get the licenses? Or is this we have to make 400 calls to Paul Feeney and Jay Barrows and we beg, barter, and steal to try and get them? I just don't know how challenging a process this might be.
Home rule petitions are usually just procedural
Okay.
because the town's asking for it. Town meeting has to vote for it. And most legislators will not go against the vote of the people.
Good to know. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead, Zach.
I have multiple issues with this home rule petition. The first one is procedural. This came before the boards last year and they voted against it before the board of selectmen. This should have gone before the EDC first, followed by the select board, and then to us. What this gentleman, with all due respect, is trying to do is circumvent all that, get it to town meeting, and jam it through the legislature, which I have a problem with. Secondly, I have a problem with what Mr. Rotundi mentioned about the marijuana situation. It would automatically, he's absolutely correct, it would automatically trigger another license. And thirdly, I have a major concern with the existing businesses in town. This gentleman puts up a 5,000 square foot, wines and more type establishment. And you can see these little guys like, Michelle's Corner Market or Mass Gas say goodbye. You force them out of business. So for me, speaking for myself, I would adamantly oppose this unless this gentleman wanted to follow the normal process, go before the EDC, go before the select board, and not try to just jam it down through town meeting as he's trying to do. Thank you.
May I respond, please? First of all, I'm before you because I was invited to come before you. I was not told to go before the EDC, which I'd be very happy to do. And there were a number of issues that the select board had itself in not being able to pass this. I was then told, I'd hoped this would have gone through the last town meeting, and it couldn't for reasons that had nothing to do with us. And so I'd be very happy to go to the EDC. I was told to get a 10 taxpayers petition, which I did. I was invited to come to this finance committee meeting, which I have, and it's up to the will of the people to do that. I'll be very happy to go to the next EDC meeting and do that. Nothing is being jammed, Mr. Sillis. I followed what I've been told to do. And as for your other things, those are all legitimate concerns, and I understand them completely. That's just a matter of, when you have Walgreens on one corner and CVS on the other corner, and that's just where the world works. So,
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Joe?
I've got a challenge with this as written as well, and I understand what Mr. Lucas is saying about, there being a requirement for a location. It seems interesting to me that the location on the west side of town is very broad, a 4-mile stretch, and the location on the east side of town is the Blue Star Park, rather than being from the center of town to the eastern line or something like that. And I know you said that this would still require you to apply for the license once you had it, but if that's the only spot that this can go in, kind of a foregone conclusion, we're not going to go through all this trouble with the legislature to say no to something like that. I'd be a lot more comfortable with this if the location was broader on that side of town.
Any other questions or statements from the Finance Committee at this point? Okay, hearing none. So Mike, we'll wait to hear. Obviously, this will come before us potentially, but the next step is to go before the EDC, and then it will circle back potentially if in time to get for this annual town meeting or this special town meeting, fall town meeting.
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Kevin?
can I ask a quick question of Mike Units? And maybe, Mike, you don't know the answer to this, but what kind of time frame are we looking at for that? That parcel of land? I mean, it doesn't look like anything's been done over there yet.
Right.
So are we still, a year or two away from really anything even being built on that parcel?
I would think so. Right now, no permits have been filed on that parcel, and I haven't heard any expected date when construction would start.
Again, Mike, if we were to apply for the license, we'd have to have a physical plan and a construction time. And at this point, we would be the first into the building, but the building would be going up, the multi-tenant building. I've seen plans for buildings, but they're open places because we don't know who our neighbors are going to be at this point in the building. But we'd be the one who would start the ball rolling. And again, we couldn't get a license without a location and a building plan, actual architectural plan with floor plans and layouts, very, very specific. Again, we just went through this in Plainville and are about to go through it in Raynham.
Okay. Thanks, David, and thanks, Michael.
Okay, I think unless there's any other questions, I think we can move on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Luca. So Michael Units, with that said, just looking at the agenda, one quick question, the town submission, the town report submission, that's one that always confuses me, but I thought when we used the FinCom letter that we wrote for the town meeting, can't that suffice for the town report submission from the Finance Committee?
It can, I don't remember what you usually do submit, but I know every year you do file a report, and so whatever the committee wants to file as their annual report.
I think historically, we've always used that Finance Committee report from the town meeting.
Okay.
From the annual town meeting. Okay. And then I'd just like to, if we can, if nobody disagrees, just move number 7 up before we talk about the capital improvements, if you will. Okay. Hearing none, so we'll go through our reorganization. One thing I'd like to do is, as we make our motions and recommendations for anybody, one thing is first, that person who is recommended, just to communicate they are interested in the position going forward, and then just a quick little bio about themselves before we go forward. So unless anyone has any questions, this is for the new members, this is our annual reorganization. There was a little bit of a abnormal routine a couple of years ago where there was a 2-year cycle, but I think it was worthwhile. But normally it's an annual process that we go through. We reorg, and what we do is we reorg the chairperson and the vice chairperson for the committee going forward, and then designate certain representatives for various committees or projects throughout the town. So I don't know if anyone has any high-level conversations at this point. If not, I will make the first motion. I will recommend Amy Sawyer as the chairperson of the Finance Committee.
I would be happy to accept.
Thanks, Amy. Do I have a second?
Second?
I have a motion and a second. Any other conversation, discussion at this point?
Nobody else wants it? Really?
You can have it.
All right. Any other conversation or discussion at this point? Okay, hearing none. I'll go through a vote. So, Mike Fiore,
Yes.
Bill Rotundi,
Yes.
Frank,
Aye.
Kevin,
Yes.
Paula,
Yes.
Zach,
Yes.
Bonnie,
Spacebar wasn't working. Yes.
Yelena,
Yes, for sure.
and I am also a yes. And Amy, I'm going to note you as an abstention.
That's fine.
All right. So that is 9 yeas and 1 abstention. Amy, congratulations.
Thank you. It's gonna be an exciting year, guys.
So I think, Amy, I think at this point, if I'm not mistaken, you take over from here, right?
Okay. Well, if that's the case, thank you so much for your leadership in the last year, Steve. It's been fabulous. And I would like to open the floor to nominations for a vice chair.
I would like to nominate Bonnie. And I have to pronounce her last name, Yazukovich.
Yazukevich.
If you can't pronounce it, you can't nominate me, Paul. I'm sorry.
Right.
Don't you wish Aaron Smith were here? Thank you, Paul.
Right, we have a nomination. Bonnie, will you accept the nomination?
I will.
Are there any other nominees or people that would like to nominate other members of the committee? Wow, everyone's knocking down doors to get into a leadership position tonight. Okay, do I have a second for the nomination of Bonnie Yazikevich as our vice chair?
Second.
Second?
All right, then, any other questions or conversation? No, everyone wants to go to bed? Okay, let's take a vote on Bonnie as our vice chair for the coming year. We'll start with Bill.
Yes.
Elena.
Yes.
Zach.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
Michael.
Yes.
Joe.
Aye.
Kevin.
Yes.
Paula.
Yes.
And Bonnie, I'm going to mark that you abstained and that it was 9 yeses and 1 abstention.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Mike Units, what else do you have for us this evening?
Just the designation of a capital.
Oh, right. Zach, you have been our representative to the Capital Committee this past year. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Would you like to remain our designee to the Capital Committee, or would you like someone else to have the pleasure?
If somebody else wants it, then I'll be more than happy to hand it off. If nobody else wants it, I'll be more than happy to stay on.
All right. I love the way you phrased that because we've had lots of volunteering happening tonight. So would anyone else be interested in serving as our designee to the Capital Committee for the coming year?
I nominate Zach.
All right. Anybody else? Going once, going twice. Do we need to re-vote if Zach is just staying on, or do we just not make a change?
I would vote.
Okay. Well then, seeing as I have a motion to nominate Zach as our representative to the Capital Committee, could I get a second, please?
Second.
Second.
That was a lot of seconds. All right. We will vote. Bill?
Yes.
Elena?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Joe?
Aye.
Kevin?
Yes.
Paula?
Yes.
Bonnie?
Yes.
All right. And Zach, we're going to have you abstain for this one. So that was,
I was going to vote no.
you were going to vote no? All right. We'll take 9 yeas, 1 no. And congratulations, Zach. You are continuing to be our representative to the Capital Committee.
Madam Chairman.
Yes, Mike, what's up?
Just one last thing. So the warrant with the Finance Committee recommendations has to be posted on October 15th. So I was just going to suggest some dates for meetings. Next Monday, the 27th, and then October 4th, and then October 6th. And the following week, the Monday is the holiday, so October 13th. If that is okay.
I think that sounds good. And then nothing on the 18th because it has to be posted on the 15th.
Right. And let's see, yeah, well, it all depends where you're at. Sometimes you don't have a recommendation on something, and then we'll meet after the warrant with recommendations is posted.
Okay, great. And just as an FYI to everyone, Steve and I joined a call with Chris Sonner and members of the select board to talk about fall town meeting and COVID precautions and all those things. We're going to plan to move the meeting to the gymnasium just to give people a little more distance. But the goal is to keep it indoors just because of the weather. So that is the current plan. We're going to meet again on the 15th of October just to reconvene and see where the numbers are, what we're feeling, where we're at, and if any changes need to be made. But we're keeping everyone's health and safety top of mind.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Zach.
is there any plans in the I don't know about this cycle, but in the next cycle to bring these meetings back to in person?
What, you don't like sitting at your desk for hours on end?
Not
I've been
really.
sitting at this desk since like 9 o'clock this morning. But I think that hopefully we will get there for the next budget cycle. I'd like to see us at least start to maybe have hybrid meetings where some of us can be in a room and maybe some of us are online. I don't know, but we're going to wait and see how it all goes. Right now, meeting space in town is so limited that it's kind of a challenge. If everyone starts meeting in person again, I don't know where we're going to go. So we'll have to see how that all plays out.
Edith Reed.
I would love that. I can just hike through the yard. Perfect. Bring my bug spray. Anything else for us, Mike?
Nope.
Well, seeing the lateness of the hour, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Lots of seconds. All right. We'll go round robin one last time. Bill.
Yes.
Elena. Oh, you're on mute, Elena.
On mute.
Yes.
Michael Fiore.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
Zach.
Yes.
Kevin.
Yes.
Paula.
Yes.
Bonnie.
Yes.
And Joe.
Aye.
I too am a yes, which makes it unanimous. Thank you all for sticking with us this evening. It was a long one.
Good night.
And thank you, Mike.